The Grand Assembly Hall was the largest structure ever built by any species in the known galaxy. It stretched across 3 kilometers of floating platform above the gas giant Velora, its crystal walls catching the light of 17 moons. Inside, 12,000 representatives from 500 star systems sat in rows that curved upward like the inside of a massive bowl. Every species that mattered was here. Every voice that shaped galactic law spoke from these seats. Ambassador Park Jisoo stood alone at the central platform, a single human woman facing the collected power of the stars. She was 43 years old, with black hair pulled back tight and eyes that showed nothing of what she felt inside. Her formal uniform was simple compared to the flowing robes and glowing garments of the alien delegates around her. Humans had never cared much for decoration. She had been standing here for 6 hours, waiting for her turn to speak. The council speaker, a Velan named Orth, towered above her on his raised seat. His species stood nearly 3 meters tall, with pale blue skin and 4 arms that they used to gesture dramatically when they spoke. The Velans had founded the Galactic Council 8,000 years ago. They had never let anyone forget it. Orth was reading from a list of petitions. A border dispute between the Kalari Empire and the Moran Confederacy. A trade agreement that needed renewal. A request to study a newly discovered black hole. Important matters for important species. Humanity's petition was last on the list. It had been last for the previous 47 sessions. Finally, Orth turned his large eyes toward Jisoo. The representative from Earth may now speak regarding their petition for status elevation. Jisoo stepped forward. Thank you, Speaker. Humanity formally requests elevation to Tier 1 status within the Galactic Council, with full voting rights on all matters of galactic importance. The response was immediate. Laughter. Not from everyone, but from enough. The Moran delegation, small creatures with too many teeth, chittered among themselves. The Kalari ambassador, a tall insectoid being, made a sound that Jisoo's translator identified as mockery. Orth raised one of his 4 hands. Humanity has been a member of this council for 300 standard years. In that time, your species has contributed significantly to many areas of galactic development. Your engineers are valued. Your scientists are productive. Your diplomats are acceptable. He paused. However, tradition demands that a species serve as Tier 3 members for no less than 1,000 years before elevation is considered. Your request is denied. Jisoo did not react. She had expected this answer. She had received this answer 11 times before. May I ask a question, Speaker? Orth waved a hand. You may. In the 300 years since humanity joined this council, how many critical systems across the galaxy have been designed, built, or maintained by human engineers? The question made several delegates shift in their seats. Orth's expression did not change. I do not have that figure available. 63%, Jisoo said. 63% of all critical infrastructure in council space was built by humans or relies on human maintenance. The power grid on Velner Prime, the medical synthesis facilities on Kalari worlds, the trade network algorithms that keep the Moran economy functioning. She paused. All human work. The Moran delegation had stopped laughing. Furthermore, Jisoo continued, humans currently serve as mediators in 78% of all diplomatic disputes between council species. We have resolved more conflicts in 3 centuries than the Council resolved in the previous 3,000 years. Orth leaned forward. These contributions are acknowledged and appreciated. But tradition is tradition, Ambassador. Perhaps in another 700 years, your petition will receive more favorable consideration. From somewhere in the upper rows, a Kalari voice called out. Perhaps the humans should be grateful we allow them to contribute at all. More laughter. Louder this time. Jisoo smiled. Several alien diplomats who had worked with humans before felt a sudden chill. They had learned that humans smiled like that only before doing something that would change everything. "The Galactic Council has made its position clear," Jisoo said. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "Humanity thanks the Council for 300 years of educational experience. We have learned exactly what our contributions are worth to this body." She reached into her uniform pocket and removed a small data chip. "This is humanity's formal notice of withdrawal from the Galactic Council, effective immediately." For a moment, the hall was silent. 12,000 representatives from 500 star systems stared at the small human woman who had just said something impossible. Then the chaos began. Orth rose from his seat, all four arms spread wide. "This is unacceptable. No species has ever withdrawn from the Council. The treaties alone would take decades to untangle." "We are aware," Jisoo said. "We are also aware that those treaties primarily benefit other species while obligating humans to provide services without adequate compensation or recognition." She placed the chip on the central platform. "Our lawyers have reviewed every document. We owe the Council nothing." She turned and began walking toward the exit. Her heels clicked against the crystal floor, the only sound in a hall that had gone completely quiet. "Ambassador Park," Orth called out. "If humanity leaves, you will lose access to Council trade routes, Council protection, Council resources." Jisoo stopped. She turned her head slightly, just enough to look back over her shoulder. "Speaker Orth, humanity built the trade routes. We designed the protection systems. We managed the resources." She smiled again. "Perhaps you should be concerned about what you will lose." She walked through the massive doors and did not look back. 300 kilometers above the gas giant, aboard the flagship, the unyielding, Admiral Kang Do-yoon received the signal. He was a man of 60 years, with gray hair and steady hands that had commanded human forces for 3 decades. He had been waiting for this moment. He opened a channel that reached every human vessel, station, and colony in the galaxy. Over 40 billion people heard his voice. "All personnel, this is Admiral Kang. Operation Homecoming is now active. All humans are to begin immediate withdrawal from non-human systems. Leave everything running, but take all proprietary documentation." He paused. "We're going home." Across the stars, humans began to pack their bags. They did not hurry. They did not panic. They simply began to leave quietly and efficiently, the way humans did everything. The galaxy had no idea what was coming. 3 weeks had passed since humanity announced their withdrawal, and the galaxy was only beginning to understand what that meant. On the industrial world of Velner Prime, Chief Engineer Yoon Mi-rae stood in the central control room of the planetary power grid. Around her, massive screens displayed the energy flow for 6 billion Velen citizens. Fusion reactors hummed beneath their feet, producing enough power to light 100 cities. Mi-rae had spent 23 years on this world, turning an unstable system into the most reliable power grid in Council Space. Now she was leaving. The Velen governor, a nervous official named Torath, watched her gather her personal belongings. His pale blue skin had turned almost white with worry. His 4 hands kept clasping and unclasping. "Engineer Yoon, please reconsider," he said. "Surely we can discuss some arrangement. Additional compensation. Better quarters. Whatever humanity requires." Mi-rae shook her head. "This decision was made above my level, Governor. All human personnel are withdrawing from non-human systems. But the reactors," Torath gestured at the screens around them, "who will maintain them? My engineers have always worked under human supervision. They do not fully understand the systems." Mi-rae paused in her packing. She felt sorry for Torath. He had always been polite to her, one of the few Velens who treated humans as equals rather than convenient servants. But feeling sorry was not enough to make her stay. "The reactors are stable," she said. "I have left detailed documentation on all maintenance procedures. Your engineers are competent. They will learn. What she did not say was that the documentation was incomplete. Not because she wanted to cause problems, but because some things about these reactors could not be written down. Human engineers understood them through intuition, through a feeling for the machines that came from decades of experience. The Vellans were intelligent, but they thought differently. Some concepts simply did not translate. Torth followed her to the transport pad. The Council is already discussing how to bring humanity back. They will offer whatever you want. Surely you can wait a few more days. Myre stepped onto the transport pad. Governor, the Council had 300 years to give humanity what we wanted. They chose to laugh at us instead. She pressed the activation button. Goodbye, Torth. I hope your engineers are fast learners. She vanished in a shimmer of light. That night, the lights on Velner Prime flickered for the first time in 200 years. It was only for a moment, barely noticeable. But 6 billion Vellans looked up at their ceiling lights and felt something they had never felt before: doubt. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out in thousands of locations. On the Kalari homeworld, the director of the Central Medical Facility discovered that 90% of their pharmaceutical production relied on formulas developed by human scientists. The formulas were not secret, but they were complex. Human chemists understood how to adjust them for different situations. Kalari chemists followed the recipes exactly and did not understand why the results were sometimes wrong. Dr. Choi Yoonji had worked at the facility for 15 years. She had trained hundreds of Kalari doctors, treated millions of patients, and developed 17 new treatments for diseases that had killed Kalari for centuries. On her last day, the facility director came to her office. You cannot leave, he said. His insect wings buzzed with agitation. There are patients who depend on you. Yoonji looked at him calmly. There are human doctors on Earth who also have patients. Patients who have been waiting for my return for 15 years while I served here. The Council will compensate you. Name your price. My price was respect, Yoonji said. The Council decided that was too expensive. She walked out of the facility and did not look back. Behind her, the Kalari medical staff gathered around patients. They were not sure they knew how to treat. The Moran Confederacy faced the most immediate crisis. Their civilization was built on trade. Their economy was the most complex in the galaxy, moving goods and services between 10,000 worlds through algorithms so sophisticated that no single person understood them completely. No single person except the humans who had designed them. Trade Representative Han Jungwoo had spent 30 years building the Moran economic system. He had taken a chaotic mess of competing markets and turned it into a smooth machine that created wealth for everyone. The Morans had paid him well for his work. They had also never invited him to any of their social gatherings, never promoted him to senior positions, never treated him as anything more than a useful tool. On his last day, the Moran Trade Council summoned him for an emergency meeting. You must explain the failsafe systems, the council chairman demanded. His small body trembled with barely controlled panic. Our economists do not understand them. Jungwoo smiled politely. The failsafe systems prevent catastrophic market crashes. They are quite simple, really. A human child could understand them, then explain them. I did, 12 years ago. Your economists said they did not need human instruction. Jungwoo stood up. Perhaps they should have paid more attention. Captain Baek Sun-ho commanded the last human transport ship to leave the Galactic Council's capital station. His vessel, the Wanderer, was small but fast. It carried 300 human personnel. The final evacuation from the heart of Galactic government. His co-pilot, Lieutenant Imnari, watched the massive station shrink on their view screen. Council Station was the largest space structure ever built, home to 50 million beings from every corner of the galaxy. It had been designed by human architects. The station looks the same as always, Nari said quietly. You would never know anything had changed. Sunho nodded. Give it time. In a few months, things will start breaking. In a year, they will wonder how they ever functioned without us. Do you think they will call us back? Sunho laughed, but there was no humor in it. They will beg us to come back. The question is whether we will answer. Nari was quiet for a moment. Captain, do you think we are doing the right thing? There are billions of beings who depend on human systems. If those systems fail, innocent people will suffer. It was a question many humans were asking themselves. The answer was not simple. We did not create this situation, Sunho said finally. We offered to stay. We asked only for recognition, for a seat at the table where decisions are made. They refused. He turned to look at his young co-pilot. Sometimes the only way to show people your value is to let them experience your absence. The ship jumped to hyperspace, leaving Council Station behind. In the darkness of space, the station continued to function perfectly. Its lights burned bright, its systems hummed smoothly, its 50 million residents went about their daily lives without concern. None of them knew that the people who kept everything running had just left. None of them knew that the small problems were already beginning. None of them knew that in the weeks to come, those small problems would grow into something much worse. The silence had begun. 2 months after humanity's withdrawal, the galaxy was falling apart. Not with explosions or invasions. Not with the drama of war. It was falling apart slowly, quietly, in 1,000 small failures that added up to something terrible. On Velner Prime, the power grid that had flickered once was now flickering constantly. Governor Torath had called in the best Velen engineers from across their empire. They studied the human documentation. They examined every component. They understood the theory perfectly, but the reactors kept having problems. The issue was simple and impossible at the same time. Human engineers had made thousands of small adjustments over the years, tiny changes that kept the system balanced. They had done this automatically, without thinking about it. It was like asking someone to explain exactly how they rode a bicycle. The knowledge was in their hands, not in any manual. Valen engineers tried their best. They followed every procedure exactly. And still, one reactor after another began to fail. 6 weeks after Yumairi left, the first major blackout hit. 3 cities, 80 million people, without power for 19 hours. Emergency systems kept hospitals running. But factories shut down, transportation stopped. And for the first time in living memory, Valens experienced darkness. Tara sent a desperate message to the Galactic Council. We need human engineers. Immediately. The Council forwarded his request to Earth. Earth did not respond. The Kalari Empire faced a different crisis on their homeworld. A disease called the Gray Sickness had been controlled for centuries. Human doctors had developed a treatment that was 99% effective. Kalari medical staff had administered this treatment millions of times without problems, but supplies ran out. And when Kalari chemists tried to make more, something went wrong. The formula was correct. The ingredients were correct. The process was correct. But the medicine did not work as well as it should. Only 80% of patients recovered. Then 70%. Then 60%. Dr. Choi Yoonji, watching the news from Earth's lunar colony, understood what had happened. The formula required precise temperature control during synthesis. Human chemists adjusted the temperature by tiny amounts based on humidity, atmospheric pressure, and a dozen other factors. It was instinct, not science. Kalari chemists did not have that instinct. She received hundreds of messages from her former colleagues, begging for help. She read each one carefully. She felt genuine pain for the patients who were suffering, but she remembered the Kalari ambassador laughing in the Grand Assembly. She remembered being called useful but limited by the medical board. She remembered 100 small insults. That had accumulated over 15 years. She did not respond. The Moran Confederacy's collapse was the most spectacular. Their economy had been the envy of the galaxy. Goods flowed smoothly between 10,000 worlds. Prices were stable. Markets were efficient. The system had worked perfectly for 200 years. It stopped working 3 weeks after the humans left. The first sign was a small error in the shipping algorithms. A cargo vessel was sent to the wrong destination. Then another. Then 100. Within days, the entire logistics network was in chaos. Ships carried goods that nobody wanted to places that did not need them. The failsafe systems that Han Jungwoo had designed were supposed to prevent this. But those systems required regular updates. They needed a human touch, small adjustments that kept them calibrated to changing conditions. Without those adjustments, the fail-safes failed. The Moran stock markets crashed on a Tuesday morning. By Thursday, 3 major trading houses had collapsed. By the following week, the entire Confederate economy was in free fall. Trade. Representative Jungwoo watched the chaos from his apartment in New Seoul. Mars. The city was beautiful, a human creation on a world that humans had transformed. Through his window, he could see gardens and parks and children playing without a care in the world. His daughter Yuna, 12 years old, sat beside him. She was watching the same news feeds, seeing the same images of Maran financial officials weeping in public, of Kalari hospitals overwhelmed with patients, of Velen cities going dark. "Dad," she said quietly, "why don't we help them?" It was the question that many humans were asking. The answer was complicated. Jungwoo turned off the news and looked at his daughter. "Do you remember last year when you helped your friend Soman with her homework every day?" Yuna nodded. She needed help with math. And what happened? She stopped trying to learn it herself. She just waited for me to do it for her. Did you keep helping her? Yuna shook her head. I stopped. She was angry at first, but then she started studying on her own. Now she is better at math than me. Jungwoo smiled sadly. That is why we are not helping them, Yuna. For 300 years, the galaxy relied on humans to solve their problems. They stopped trying to solve problems themselves. They forgot that they could. But people are suffering. Yes, Jungwoo agreed. And that suffering is terrible. But if we go back now, nothing changes. They will continue to use us, continue to disrespect us, continue to treat us as tools instead of partners. He put his arm around his daughter. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to let them feel the consequences of their choices. On Earth, President Seo Ha-jin held daily meetings with her cabinet. The news from across the galaxy arrived in a constant stream. Each report, worse than the last. Defense Minister Bae Tae-ho brought the morning briefing. The Kalari have lost 4 major medical centers. They are requesting emergency pharmaceutical supplies. Foreign Secretary Moon Hae-jin added, the Moran economy has contracted by 40%. They are experiencing food shortages on 17 worlds. Ha-jin listened to each report without expression. When they finished, she asked a simple question. Have any of them apologized? The cabinet members looked at each other. The answer was no. Then we wait, Ha-jin said. Madam President, Tae-ho said carefully, there are voices calling for humanitarian assistance, regardless of political considerations. Ha-jin nodded. I know, and those voices come from good hearts. But humanitarian assistance would allow the Council to pretend that nothing has changed. They would accept our help and then go back to treating us exactly as before. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the blue sky of Earth. We are not being cruel. We are being clear. Respect is not optional. Partnership is not one-sided. She turned back to her cabinet. We will wait until they understand that, however long it takes. Across the galaxy, the unraveling continued. Systems failed. Economies collapsed. Diseases spread. And slowly, painfully, the 12,000 species of the Galactic Council began to understand something they had never considered before. They needed humanity, not as servants, not as tools, not as a useful species to be kept in its place. They needed humanity as equals. The question was whether they would admit it before it was too late. 4 months after humanity's withdrawal, the Galactic Council did something it had never done in 900 years. It called an emergency session. The Grand Assembly Hall, once filled with confident voices and casual laughter, was now a place of fear and desperation. The 12,000 representatives who gathered there were not the same beings who had dismissed humanity's petition. They were tired. They were scared. Many of them had seen their world suffer in ways they never imagined possible. Speaker Arth stood at his raised platform, but he no longer looked powerful. His pale blue skin had faded to an unhealthy gray. His forearms hung loose at his sides. The crisis had aged him terribly. "This emergency session is called to order," he announced, his voice lacking its usual authority. "We have one item on the agenda. The immediate recall of humanity to the Galactic Council." There were no objections, no laughter, no dismissive waves. The representatives sat in silence, waiting. "The Council formally acknowledges that humanity's contributions to galactic civilization have been undervalued." The words seemed to cause Orith physical pain. "We acknowledge that the denial of Tier 1 status was a mistake. We acknowledge that humanity has been treated unfairly." He paused, gathering himself for what came next. "The Galactic Council hereby offers humanity full Tier 1 status with immediate effect. Complete voting rights on all matters. Senior positions in all council agencies. Everything that was previously denied." He looked directly into the broadcast cameras that transmitted his words across the galaxy. "Humanity, we ask you to return. We need you." On Earth, President Seo Hajin watched the broadcast with her cabinet. The room was quiet as Orith spoke, as the representatives applauded his words, as the message of apology and invitation spread to every corner of known space. When it ended, Defense Minister Bai Taiho leaned forward. "They are offering everything we originally asked for." "Yes," Hajin agreed. Foreign Secretary Moon Haijin studied the president's face. "But you are not satisfied." Hajin shook her head slowly. 300 years, Haijin. 300 years we asked politely. 300 years we proved our value. 300 years we accepted disrespect with patience and hope." She stood and walked to the window. "They are not offering us what we deserve. They are offering us what they think will make us come back and fix their problems. What do you propose?" Taiho asked. Hajin turned to face her cabinet. "I propose we change the relationship permanently. Not with anger or revenge, but with clear terms that protect our people forever." She outlined her plan. It was bold. It was unprecedented. It would transform the galaxy. When she finished, the cabinet sat in stunned silence. Then, one by one, they nodded their approval. Ambassador Park Jisoo returned to the Grand Assembly 1 week later. But she did not come as a petitioner, standing alone before thousands of alien delegates. She came as humanity's sole representative, with full authority to negotiate on behalf of 40 billion people. The hall was silent as she walked to the central platform. Every eye watched her. Every translator captured her words. "The Galactic Council has offered humanity full Tier 1 status," she began. "We appreciate the gesture. However, humanity must respectfully decline." Shocked murmurs rippled through the assembly. Orith rose from his seat. "Ambassador, surely you understand the significance of our offer. We are giving you everything you asked for." "You are giving us what we asked for 300 years ago," Jisoo corrected. "The situation has changed. Our terms have changed with it." She produced a document and held it up for all to see. "This is humanity's counter-proposal. I will summarize its main points." The hall fell silent again. "First, humanity will return to council space. Our engineers, doctors, economists, and specialists will resume their work. The systems that have failed will be repaired. The crises that have emerged will be resolved." Relief swept through the assembly. Several delegates actually smiled. However, Jisoo continued, and the smiles disappeared. Humanity will not return as members of the Galactic Council. We will return as administrators. Administrators? Orth repeated, confusion in his voice. All critical infrastructure across Council space will be placed under human oversight. Power grids, medical facilities, trade networks, communication systems. Human directors will supervise these systems with full authority to make decisions without Council interference. The assembly erupted. Delegates shouted objections in 100 languages. Arth had to call for order 3 times before the noise subsided. This is outrageous, the Kalari ambassador declared. You are asking us to surrender control of our own worlds. We are asking you to trust the people who built those systems, Jisoo replied calmly. The same people you refuse to trust with voting rights. This is worse than Tier 1 status, a Moran delegate protested. You are demanding supremacy. Jisoo shook her head. We are demanding competent management. Your engineers can continue their work under human supervision. Your economies can function with human oversight. Your medical facilities can operate with human guidance. She paused. Or you can continue without us. The choice is yours. The assembly debated for 3 days. Representatives argued and pleaded and threatened. Some called for war against humanity. Others begged their colleagues to accept any terms that would bring the humans back. In the end, desperation won. The power failures were spreading. The medical crisis was deepening. The economic collapse was accelerating. Every day without human expertise cost billions of lives and trillions in resources. On the 4th day, Speaker Orith called for a vote. The question was simple. Accept humanity's terms or face continued decline. The vote was unanimous. Every single representative from every single species voted to accept. When the results were announced, Jisoo allowed herself a small smile. Humanity accepts the Council's decision. Our personnel will begin returning to their stations within 1 week. She turned to leave, then paused. Speaker Arth, I want you to understand something. We did not want this. We asked for equality, not authority. We asked for respect, not power. She looked around the great hall at the thousands of representatives who had once laughed at humanity. You created this situation when you refused to share power. Now you will see what happens when humans lead instead of serve. Admiral Kang Do-yoon received the news aboard the Unyielding. The old warrior read the terms of the agreement twice, then allowed himself a rare laugh. Captain Beak, he called to his subordinate, signal all human vessels. Operation Homecoming has reached its final phase. We are returning to Council space. Sunho looked at the message. Admiral, these terms. We are essentially taking control of the galaxy. No, Do-yoon corrected. We are taking responsibility for the galaxy. There is a difference. He stood and looked out at the stars. For 300 years, we carried the weight of galactic civilization on our shoulders. We did it without recognition, without thanks, without power. Now we will do it properly. And if they resist, if they try to change the terms later, Do-yoon smiled grimly. Then we leave again. And this time, they know exactly what that means. Across human space, the preparations began. Engineers gathered their tools. Doctors packed their medical kits. Economists reviewed their models. Diplomats studied their briefings. They were going back. But they were not going back as servants. They were going back as the people who would rebuild a broken galaxy. And everyone would know who held it together. 1 year had passed since humanity withdrew from the Galactic Council. 1 year since the galaxy learned what it meant to live without human hands guiding their systems. 1 year since everything changed. Unity Station floated at the geometric center of the galaxy, a massive structure that humanity had built in just 8 months. It was a symbol of the new order. A place where human administrators coordinated the reconstruction of 500 star systems. Ships from every species docked at its ports. Their crews working alongside human supervisors who had earned something more valuable than authority. They had earned respect. Administrator General Park Jisoo stood on the observation deck, watching the endless flow of vessels arriving and departing. She was 44 now, her hair showing the first touches of gray. The past year had aged her, but it had also transformed her. She was no longer a diplomat asking for scraps of recognition. She was the most powerful human in the galaxy. "The morning report, Administrator," said her assistant, a young man named Kwon Ji-hoon. Jisoo took the tablet and reviewed the numbers. Power grid stability across council space, 97%, up from the critical 32% 6 months ago. Medical facility efficiency, 91% and climbing. Economic indicators, steady growth after 9 months of recovery. Humanity had done what they promised. They had fixed everything. On Vulner Prime, Director Yoon Mi-rae walked through the control room of the planetary power grid. The screen showed perfect stability. Not a single flicker had occurred in 7 months. Beside her walked Governor Torath. His blue skin returned to its healthy color. He had changed during the crisis. The arrogance that once defined him was gone, replaced by genuine gratitude. "Director Yoon," he said quietly, "I want to thank you again for returning. I know we did not deserve your help." Mi-rae considered his words. "Governor, we did not come back for thanks. We came back because these systems matter. The people who depend on them matter." She paused at a window overlooking the Vulan capital city. "But I will say this. Your young engineers are learning well. In 10 years, they may not need human supervision anymore." Torath nodded. "And when that day comes? Then we will celebrate together," Mi-rae said. "That has always been the goal, Governor. Not permanent control. Partnership. Real partnership. Between equals who respect each other." On the Kalari homeworld, Dr. Choi Yoonji ran the newly established Galactic Health Authority. Her office received reports from medical facilities across 500 systems. Diseases that had returned during the crisis were now under control. New treatments were being developed. The gray sickness that had killed thousands of Kalari was once again 99% treatable. Her assistant informed her that a delegation of Kalari medical students had arrived. She rose to greet them. The students were young, their insect wings folded respectfully. They bowed to her in the Kalari style, a gesture of honor they had once reserved only for their own leaders. "Dr. Choi," their leader said, "we wish to learn human medical techniques. Not just the formulas, but the thinking behind them. The intuition." Yoonji smiled. This was what she had always wanted. Not servants who followed orders, but colleagues who understood. "That will take years of study," she warned them. "We understand," the student replied. "We're willing to do what is necessary." Yoonji looked at their eager faces and felt something she had not felt in 15 years of working with Kalari. "Hope. Then let us begin," she said. The Moran Confederacy had undergone the most dramatic transformation. Their economy, once the most complex in the galaxy, had been rebuilt from the ground up. Trade Representative Han Jung-woo had designed a new system, one that Moran economists could actually understand and maintain. He visited the Moran Trade Council on the anniversary of the collapse. The same officials who had demanded his help while treating him as less than equal now greeted him with deep bows. "Representative Han," the council chairman said, "we have studied the new economic models extensively. Our junior economists believe they can manage the basic functions independently within 3 years." Jung-woo nodded. "That is excellent progress. In 10 years, you may not need human oversight at all." The chairman looked surprised. "You want us to become independent of human administration?" "Of course," Jung-woo said. "Healthy partnerships do not require permanent dependency. We want to work with species who can stand on their own feet." He smiled. "Think of us as teachers. Good teachers want their students to surpass them." On Mars, in the city of New Seoul, Han Yuna celebrated her 13th birthday. Her father had taken the day off from his duties to be with her. They sat in the garden of their home, watching the sunset paint the terraformed sky in shades of orange and pink. "Dad," Yuna said, "my teacher says that some aliens are angry about human administration. They think we took too much power." Jungwoo considered his response carefully. His daughter was old enough for honest answers. "Some are angry," he agreed. "Change is difficult, especially when it comes with a loss of pride. But Yuna, do you know what most aliens think about human administration?" She shook her head. "Most of them are relieved. They were scared during the crisis. They did not know how to fix their problems. Now they feel safe again." He put his hand on her shoulder. "Power is not about control, Yuna. Real power is about making things work. About taking responsibility when no one else can." Unity Station hosted the first anniversary celebration. Representatives from every council species attended, but this time they came as guests, not as rulers dismissing a minor petition. President Seo Ha-jin addressed the assembly. Behind her stood the cabinet that had gambled everything on a simple truth: those who build can always walk away. "1 year ago, humanity made a difficult choice," Ha-jin said. "We chose to leave rather than accept continued disrespect. We chose dignity over comfort. We chose uncertainty over injustice." The assembly listened in silence. Many questioned our decision. Many called it selfish. Many predicted that we would fail, that the galaxy would fall apart without our help, that we would be forced to return on any terms. She paused. They were right about one thing. The galaxy did struggle without us. But we did not return on any terms. We returned on our terms. She looked across the assembled representatives at beings from 500 worlds who now understood what they had once ignored. Today, humanity does not seek revenge for past wrongs. We do not hold grudges against those who dismissed us. We look forward, not backward. She smiled, and for once it was not the smile that made aliens nervous. It was a smile of genuine warmth. "We hope that the lesson of this past year endures. That respect cannot be demanded, but must be earned. That partnership requires equality. That those who build deserve a voice in how their work is used." The assembly rose in applause. Not the polite acknowledgement they had once given humanity. This was genuine appreciation, born from months of hardship and the recognition of how close they had come to disaster. Admiral Kang Do-yoon stood beside Captain Baek Sun-ho, watching the celebration. The old warrior had seen many things in his long career, but nothing quite like this. "We inherited the stars," Sun-ho said quietly. Do-yoon shook his head. "No, Captain. We did not inherit them. We earned them." He looked at the lights of Unity Station, at the ships of 100 species docked in peace, at the new galaxy that humanity had helped create. Our ancestors came from a small blue planet. They looked up at the stars and dreamed of reaching them. They could never have imagined this moment. Do you think they would be proud? Do-hyun smiled. "I think they would remind us that the work is never finished. The stars are not a prize to be won. They are a responsibility to be carried." Far below, on hundreds of worlds, humans went about their daily work. Engineers maintained systems. Doctors treated patients. Economists monitored markets. Diplomats resolved disputes. They did what humans had always done. They built. They fixed. They improved. The difference was that now, everyone knew their value. Ambassador Park Ji-soo stood alone on the observation deck after the celebration ended. She watched the stars, the same stars she had watched from the Grand Assembly 1 year ago. So much had changed since then. Her communicator buzzed with a message from President Ha-jin. 4 words. "Well done, Administrator General." Ji-soo smiled and put the communicator away. She did not need praise. She did not need recognition. She had spent her career fighting for respect that should have been given freely. Now, finally, it was. Humanity had severed ties with the Galactic Council. They had watched chaos spread across the stars. They had been called back in desperation and given authority they had never sought. And in doing so, they had shown the galaxy something it would never forget. Respect is not a gift. It is earned, and humanity had earned the stars.